Hello there everybody, it is Tegan here again today, and for this video I am going to be doing my July wrap-up. So the books that I read throughout July, I actually did so well this month, you guys. I have not read very much this year. I mean, I've read, but it hasn't been as much as what I would normally do, but I read 8 books this month, guys. I read 8 books. I am so proud of myself. Like, you have no idea just how proud I am of myself at this current moment. And the month is not entirely over yet. It is currently the 28th of July, but the booktubeathon starts on the 30th of July, and I know that I'm going to be reading throughout that, but I'm going to save whatever books I read throughout that for my booktubeathon wrap-up. So I'm going to be doing this now because I don't think I'm going to be reading very much, at least finishing any books between now and the booktubeathon. So yeah, I'm going to share with you guys the 8 books that I read. I had such a good reading month. I read so many good books and I want to share them all with you. Also, I'm sorry if the lighting looks really weird in my viewfinder right now, and I'm really sorry if it looks weird in the actual camera. It's dark and I'm using lamps, so I apologize. So the very first book that I read in the month of July was Will Grayson, Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan. I mentioned this book in my Lifeline Book Fest book haul, and I mentioned that I had already read it. I really did enjoy this book. This book follows 2 characters by the name of Will Grayson, and they don't know each other at the beginning of the book, but their paths end up crossing and they end up meeting each other and figuring out some stuff in life together. They're both going through some pretty tough times, and they kind of help each other out a little bit and just get to know each other. I did enjoy this book. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It wasn't my favorite John Green book that I've ever read. Maybe it's because it's mixed with David Levithan. I've never actually read any of his books, so maybe that has something to do with it. But I found it kind of slow at parts, and it was kind of confusing for me to tell the difference between each perspective, because it is told in 2 perspectives, but both of the characters' names are Will. And one of the perspectives is written all in lowercase, and the other one is written all like with normal punctuation, so there's that difference. But I actually didn't realize that it was in multiple different perspectives for the first few chapters, and then finally I noticed and I had to go back and reread it because they're so similar to each other. But overall, I did enjoy this book. I liked all of the characters, and obviously John Green's writing is always really good, and I definitely could sense a different style throughout it as well, which would have come from David Levithan. But yeah, overall, I did enjoy it. Just wasn't one of my favorite John Green books that I've ever read. The next 3 books that I read are actually an entire trilogy, and that is the Divergent trilogy by Veronica Roth. Now, if you know me at all, you would know that the Divergent trilogy is my favorite trilogy of all time. I love it to absolute pieces. I've read it a bunch, but I have not reread it in a very long time, and so I decided to do that this month. However, I decided to do it a little bit differently. I listened to the audiobooks of these books, and I really enjoy doing it that way. I really enjoy getting a little bit of a different way of reading it. If you don't know what the Divergent trilogy is, this story follows a girl by the name of Tris, and she lives in a world where the community is split up by 5 different factions. So there's the Abnegation, the Erudite, the Amity, the Dauntless, and the Candor, and they all represent a different personality trait. And basically, when you turn 16, you take an aptitude test, and that tells you which faction you should choose. But Tris, her results come out inconclusive because she is what is known as a Divergent, which means she doesn't fit into one faction. So it's basically about her trying to come to terms with her divergence and figure out how to live in a new faction. And yeah, the entire trilogy, obviously there's a lot more to the entire trilogy, but If you haven't read this trilogy, what are you doing with your life? Honestly, I'm sorry, but you need to read it. It is incredible, and you need it in your life because I love it so much. And Veronica Roth has an amazing writing style, and this trilogy will always hold such a special place in my heart. And I always give these books 5 out of 5 stars. I love them so much, and they just get better every single time that I read them. The 5th book that I read in the month of July was Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters by Rick Riordan. I am finally making my way through this series, you guys. I have been telling myself that I am going to read this series for so long, and I've been talking on my channel for so long about how I'm going to read the series, but I've never gotten past the first book. I've read like the first part of this book a few times, and I've never carried on with it because I've always gotten caught up in different stories. But I finally read the second book and finished it. And if you didn't watch my booktubeathon TBR, I am going to be reading book number 3 during the booktubeathon, and I am very excited to do that because this book left off on such a cliffhanger, and I need to know what happens next. I need to know. And I for somehow kept myself unspoiled from this book somehow. I don't understand how, but I somehow have. And so I just need to carry on with the series. And I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I did really enjoy it. And if you don't know what the Percy Jackson series is about, it is about a boy named Percy who discovers that he is a demigod, and he goes to this camp called Camp Half-Blood, which is a place where demigods go to learn about what they can do and to stay safe. And that is all I'm gonna go into because this obviously was the second book, so I cannot explain the plot of this book. But yes, I really enjoyed it. I'm so happy I'm carrying on with the series, and I'm so excited to read the next book. The 6th book that I read this month was Me and Earl and the Dying Girl by Jessie Andrews. This was another reread. I love this book. I loved it just as much this time as I did the first time around, and it's been a few years since I read this book, and I was just feeling in a reading mood and I didn't know what I wanted to read, so I decided to pick this one up. If you don't know what Me and Earl and the Dying Girl is about, it is about a boy named Greg who kind of flies under the radar at school and just in life in general. He doesn't really have very many friends until it comes to Earl, who he kind of refers to as a co-worker and not really a friend because they make films together, and his life has been this way for as long as he can remember. He's tried to keep it this way throughout all of high school until somebody that he used to know named Rachel gets cancer, and his mom forces him to go and hang out with her, and his life kind of takes a 180, and he kind of has to fit Rachel into his life, and it's really good. It's really good. It's written really strangely. It's written in a lot of different styles. So there's script, and there's like the dialogue is like that, and there is, let me find another one. There are lists like that, and some of it is written in just normal writing, but it is written in a bunch of different styles, which makes it so interesting to read, and I flew through this book. It's so easy to get through. I gave this book a 4.5 stars out of 5 stars. I absolutely adore this book, and this book is not a romance. This book is funny, and it is about a girl who is dying, but it is hilarious. The second to last book that I read in the month of July was Looking for Alaska by John Green. Oh, I was feeling John Green this month, you guys. I just wanted to read and read all of John Green, and I had never read this before. And it is it his first book? I feel like it's his first book. This is the 10th anniversary edition of the book. It's very shiny. I picked this one up a while ago because I loved the 10-year anniversary edition of the book, and I needed to have it even though I had never read the actual original book. Oh, I loved this book so much, and I did not know what this book was about. I had absolutely no idea what this book was about, and it destroyed me. loved this so much, and I don't know how this book has been out for 10 years. I don't know how I've been watching BookTube for so long, and I've been a fan of books for so long and a fan of John Green for so long, and I had never been spoiled for this book, and I had absolutely no idea what it was about. I went into it completely blind. I had never heard really anything about, like, talked about in this book. This book, Looking for Alaska, is about a boy named Miles who goes to a boarding school and meets some friends, one of whom is named Alaska, the other one is named the Colonel, and then a few other people, and his life gets completely flipped around, and he sees things so differently, and he makes really good friends with these people. And the book is written, there's no chapters, but I mean there's technically chapters. The very beginning of the book is 136 days before, and so reading through it you're like, what is this counting down to? What is this counting down to? And oh my goodness. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I read so many good books this month. And the final book, the 8th book that I read during July, was my absolute favorite book that I read in July. This has become one of my favorite books of all time. I am so in love with this book. And that is Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. I ordered this off of Book Depository because I was watching through some of Read by Zoe's videos, and I watched one of her readathon videos. She does like her 24-hour readathon sometimes, and this was one of the books that she read. And she said that she absolutely loved it, and the way that she described it made me want to read it immediately, so I immediately ordered it from Book Depository. This book got to my house yesterday morning. I had uni all day. I picked up this book at about 6 p.m., 5:30. I read it straight through till just before 10. I read it straight. I read this book in one sitting. I did not want to put it down. I did not want it to end. I loved this book so much. As you can see, I sticky noted a lot in this book. I cried, I laughed. I was laughing on the first page. This book is about a girl named Eliza who writes a comic or a graphic novel online called Monstrous Sea. And nobody knows that it's her that writes this. This online story is a phenomenon. Everybody loves it, but nobody knows it's actually Eliza writing it, because her character that she sort of plays online is completely different to who she is in real life, because her character online, or her persona online, is so outgoing, and she's just this boisterous person online. But when it comes to her in real life, she doesn't have many friends. She kind of just keeps to herself, and she's very quiet. She doesn't really talk to anybody at school until she meets this person named Wallace. And Wallace turns out to be a huge Monstrous Sea fan, a huge fan. And she doesn't tell Wallace that she is the one that makes this story, but Wallace writes fan fiction, and Wallace just thinks that she does fan art. Eliza's secret then gets shared with the world, and this book is about her figuring out how to deal with that, and how to deal with her anxiety, and how to deal with living offline just as much as she lives online. And I found this book so relatable. Obviously, I don't have a really famous graphic story online anywhere, obviously. But just the fact that most of her friends are online, she is this huge fan of all of these things, and I don't know, I just related to her so much. And this book originally reminded me a lot of Fangirl, because obviously Fangirl is about a girl who writes fan fiction about her favorite thing, but that's not what this is, because Eliza is creating her own thing. But it kind of reminded me of that, and I love Fangirl, so I knew I would at least enjoy this. But oh my god, I did not think that I would enjoy it as much as I did. All of the characters, the writing, this book made me cry. Throughout like the last quarter of this book, I was crying. It made me laugh. I loved this book so much. And if you haven't read it, you have to go and pick it up, because it is absolutely incredible. It goes without saying that I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this book. I loved this book, and it's become one of my favorite books that I've ever read. And honestly, I really just want to reread it now because I loved it so much. And yeah, it's become one of my favorite contemporary books that I've ever read. I loved it to pieces. So these were the 8 books that I read during July. I am very proud of myself. I have not read this much in a month in a very long time, and so I am very proud of myself for getting through 8 whole books. And as if you couldn't tell, I loved every book that I read this month. Normally that doesn't happen. Normally there's at least 1 or 2 that I'm kind of iffy on, but I loved every book that I read this month so much. Oh, I love this stack of books so much. So much. Alright, so that is going to be about it for this wrap up. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it. I would absolutely love to know what books you guys read during the month of July. Let me know down in the comments, because I would love to know. And if you enjoyed this video, you can give it a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate that. And you can also subscribe to my channel if you want to be told when I post new videos. I would really appreciate that as well. And yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I definitely enjoyed doing it. I love talking about books. And yeah, that's gonna be about it for this video today. I'm Tegan, this is Bookwormia, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!